Welcome to The Top, the podcast that provides you with what you need to succeed in the real estate world. Brought to you by the Collin County Association of Realtors. Get ready to tackle top real estate topics in bite-sized amounts with CCAR President Shauna Acquisto and Jonna Fernandez, CCAR's Chief Operating Officer.
Hi, Shauna.
Hi, Jonna.
Welcome to The Top.
I'm happy to be here.
I am too, and I'm very happy to talk about ways to improve and maintain your mental health.
This is such an important conversation. As we know, real estate professionals are independent contractors and often isolated. And we take on heavy mental burdens for our clients every day. And, I think it's super important that we stop and understand we need to take care of ourselves.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. And today's conversation is going to be so helpful because we are going to have practical tips to protect our mental health. However, if you're listening today and you're struggling, I encourage you to seek help from a licensed professional who can make sure you get all the care that you need.
I agree, Jonna. Whomever you are so important, and this world is better with you and all of us in it. And Katie, who is our guest today, my world is better with you in it.
Can't you cry at the beginning?
We're not going to cry. I'm like the worst.
No.
So Katie Sholty is a yoga and fitness instructor who focuses on the whole person. So Katie, can you tell us about your approach to fitness and mental health?
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for inviting me here today. And I approach fitness and mental well-being cohesively. That our bodies and our brains and our hearts are intimately intertwined. And so to say I'm going to do this for my body, but my mental health is a whole other thing, why try and separate them? Because they're always going to be connected. If you've ever been in pain and hurt yourself or been super stressed out, right? Your fuse is short, right? You're going to snap off at someone who cut you off on the freeway too soon, or your child who needs something who isn't doing what they said. So when we take care of our physical well-being, this vessel of our body, it's also a great entryway to take care of our mental health. I train my clients, I work with clients to move well in this vessel of our body. That when we move with ease, when we have a strong sense of our center, right? Of how do I hold myself well so that I can move in all the different ways, right? I can reach down and pick something up. I can reach up and grab something from a high shelf. I can turn around. I can move in all the ways. And it's the same thing in our life, right? We want to have a strong sense of center, of a strong core of intention, the core of our purpose of why we're doing the work that we do. And then I can adapt in all the ways. Then I can be okay, how do I take that core intention to support my real estate clients? How do I take that core intention to be a good partner to my husband, wife? How do I take that core intention to be a good mother, a good father, a good whatever the different roles are that in your life? And I use the physical body as that entry point to get that clarity of center and purpose so that you feel it in your mental well-being, in your heart, soul, spirit. There's lots of ways to describe that internal state.
I like that.
Something you do say all the time that kind of resonated with me is our body is a vessel. And the first time I heard it, I thought, okay, I've never heard it described as that, but if you think of it that way, it kind of makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
So
I love that.
Interesting.
Yeah, for me too, I had heard it once from a yoga teacher of mine, and it was very impactful because it's the vessel needs to be taken care of. Otherwise, it's not going to carry you. But it's not all that we are. Media sometimes will give us this information of what I look like is the only thing that is valuable about myself for men and for women in our society. And taking care of the vessel is important because if it breaks down, it's causing a lot of other troubles. But what you're carrying inside that vessel is incredibly valuable.
Yeah, totally. So what role do you believe mental health plays in overall life satisfaction and success? And how do you incorporate this into your practice? I know this, but I want you to...
I know. So success, life satisfaction, it's all a mental construct, right? What you define as success is going to be different than what the person who lives next door to you defines as success. Is going to be different than what a person on the other side of the world defines as success. So feeling successful is all in your head. And that's why I have people come back to, okay, well, what's the core of what's important to you? And that way, all the things on the periphery, like things that it seems like that's supposed to be a marker of success, but you're like, well, it doesn't really resonate with me. I don't really connect to that. Then you're like, oh, I can let that go. Yes. Right? That's just this mental construct of what I thought success was going to feel like or success was going to look like. I mean, how many of us have gotten to a goal or like achieved something and you're like, I thought this would be it all. And it wasn't. Like, then there was something else. And that's good. It's good that the goals are always changing, that we're always growing, we're always in an evolution. So then success can be these other small things along the way of like, oh, how did that impact, right, my core? Like for me, I'm all about nourishing people. So when I finish a class, if I hear someone resonate back to me something like, oh, my body felt so much better, like this was aching and I'm done, or like, man, I was so depleted from a long week of work and suddenly I feel re-energized. I'm like, I nourished you. Like that's success to me. That's life satisfaction to me. So it's all in the head.
Yes.
Very good. So you talked earlier about movement and being able to turn this way and reach the top shelf, things like that, right? So how does movement support mental well-being in addition to physical?
Absolutely. I was talking earlier a little bit about like, if you're hurt or you're injured, right? Suddenly you're restricted in what you can do. You start to avoid certain things because you're like, oh, my neck hurts. So like, I can't turn my head and like look over my shoulder when I'm changing lanes. And that seeps into your head because suddenly you're always aware of like, okay, what can't I do? What do I need to avoid doing? And that seeps into your mental sort of outlook on life of like, what can, like I'm looking at what can't I do? What am I avoiding doing? But when you can physically move well, then you're like, all right, like that's not a limiting factor. And then lots of things are possible. And you see the resiliency of your body and all the possibilities of that. And that feeds into other things of like, oh, I suddenly did this posture, this movement. I felt strong. I felt connected. And you can translate that. You can transfer that into other things in your life of like, I'm going to try something else that's out of my comfort zone. Like maybe I'm going to go on a hike I wouldn't have done, or maybe I'm going to like take a class that I was a little nervous about, but like I did this other thing that was out of my comfort zone and I felt successful and it was hard, but I'm also capable and I'm resilient. And so when I'm teaching, I really try to have people reflect on, okay, what did you physically do that was out of your comfort zone? Where do you get out of your comfort zone when you're not working with me in this space? And where could you let that remind you that you can get out of your comfort zone and you're strong?
Yeah. So I want to touch on something that we talked about yesterday, that I was in Katie's class and we were doing some type of plank or something, and I was to the point where like my arms were shaking and I was like, I'm going to stop. In my mind, I knew I was just about to stop. It wasn't time to stop. Somehow she like zoned in on me and she was like, Shauna, your form is so good. And I was like, why did she point me out? Like, and then I realized
I gotta stay this way to show everybody.
Yes. And then I realized, okay, I was quitting on myself when physically I could do that. And I felt just that little thing, I felt so much better afterwards. But that's where I think you're so good at, being so in tune with people and identifying that. And I don't even know if you identified that I was just about to be done, but I don't know, you kind of re-energized me. So
it always is an interesting thing when that happens. Like,
yes.
People will be like, oh, I felt like you were teaching the class just for me.
Yeah, it's like when you're at church and they're talking to me.
And I'm like, yes, but I am. Like for every person in the room, right? Like we're going to pick up on the things that really resonate with us. And like that moment's just beautiful because like her form was like, it's funny when she was telling me, she's like, I was ready to collapse. And I'm like, your form was still so centered, so strong and aligned that even when you're ready to collapse, you still know you're like, all right, like I'm flagging, but like I'm not going to let my form collapse, and that's in life too. It's like, I'm not saying, and I always like to be clear, stop and rest. There's nothing wrong with stopping and resting. There's some quote that it's like, stop and rest, but don't quit. It's a Banksy quote. It's something like that. But it's beautiful. It's this idea of like, yes, we stop and rest. That's not giving up. That's not quitting.
Yeah.
That is how we build sustainability. That is how we build endurance so that we come back and we try again.
So how often do you meet people who come to you for physical need without realizing their mental health is struggling, and then you pick up on that. Yeah. Does that happen?
I mean, why did you come? You came to yoga because your back hurt.
Yes.
Yeah, but you found something that
That's
resonated
why I love this question
far deeper.
because it's,
I know. I read it. I was like, well, with Shauna, like she's a prime example of that. And you're not alone, and you're not the only person that does that. I've got a couple clients at the studio where I teach, and they'll be like, oh, I'm a chronic overworker. I know I need to take breaks, or I know I need to do things to like take care of myself more often. And I had one woman come in the other week. She's like, Katie, I was gonna keep working and skip your class today. She's like, and then I heard you in my head. She's like, okay, what's going to make me sustainable, right? What's going to replenish me? What's going to make me be able to revive? And so she's coming to a physical practice of yoga, but she knows that mental break that she gets from working, but that's also mental replenishment of the mental work we do in the class is also going to make her sustainable. So it's really often that people will discover that because they have the space to discover that. So often it's like we've got the phone, we're juggling multiple priorities, and we can do that. We can do all that stuff. But when you take the space to clear, you're sort of like, okay, like how is this sustainable? Is it draining to me? Is it replenishing me? Where are the things I need to see that? And they have the time, space to look at that.
Yeah.
And then to start to be like, okay, how do I build a practice? How do I build things into my life that help support me?
I call this my unintended transformation because I went in for one thing and what I've got out of it is amazing. And, like I said, you may have to, it's just like you go to somebody that, fits with you and your personality. And maybe you need to find, you need to go and attend different classes and find that instructor that does it. But I can tell you this is so important to just have the right mindset and get your mind right if you want to be truly the best version of yourself that you can be. So
yeah, I always like to tell people, like, don't go to just one class because instructors are different, music is different, intensity level and style is different. So you got to give it a couple different classes, different styles, different teachers, because you're going to find someone who will resonate better for you, right? Like I'll make cheesy jokes. I'm like, I love a variety of music. But
and then sometimes she'll break out in a dance, and I'm like,
and then sometimes I'm kind of like breaking out and dance because, like, I'll joke. I'm like, yoga doesn't mean you can't dance or you can't jump. Like it's okay. It's joyful movement in our body, and that moving well means that sometimes we might jump around and things like that. But that's not going to be great for everybody. Someone might need something that dials down the intensity more to like chill out, to help them rebalance whatever they do when they're not in a class for the other 23 hours of their day.
Yes.
You said something that really kind of struck me with something else I've heard before. So while you were talking, I have the thought that I can only imagine that people really look forward to their time that they spend with you each week. It kind of refills and replenishes. And I remember, several years ago hearing you talked about a vessel, that our bodies are a vessel, and the whole concept of vessel, and that a vessel can pour out, and you pour out into all you do. You pour out to others, you pour out to your work, and eventually there's going to be nothing left to pour out, and you have to replenish it and refill it. And I have a feeling that when people come and they spend that time with you during their day, that's that replenishing and that refilling that they needed in their vessel.
Absolutely. I talked about my intention being about nourishment. It is like if the time and the space that I spend with people can refill them, can nourish them, so that they can then pour out into all the things they're passionate about in their lives, right? The people that they care about, the work that you are connected to and inspired by, then it's like, it's sustainable.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. So when someone comes to see you, right, how do you, at the very beginning, how do you help them develop healthy habits and self-care routines that support, their mental health, things like exercise, meditation, therapy? How do you get them started on that path?
Absolutely. Sean, I'll tell you, every class I do, and when we all come down to our back, we close our eyes and we breathe. We have to breathe. Not like we have to breathe to be alive. Like otherwise, what are we doing? But like the breath is so immediate and it's so present. And when we are so often thinking about the 10 things that have to happen after this, the 4 things I did right before this, and I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I put a typo in that text. I mean, I probably hit send too soon on that email. we're just in our breath, then suddenly we can get really clear on like, what do I need right now? What's going to let me be present, let me be connected? And then when you start to understand that about yourself, and then you start to move better in your body, and I really come to the physical movement from a place of good alignment, a sustainable movement, so that you're strong, not just when you're doing like funny yoga postures on a mat, because some of them are funny. Like you're like, I'm not doing this in my daily life. But I try to highlight people like, yeah, you have to lift your knee to walk forward. So when they lift their knee in yoga, I want you to understand like how that mechanic's happening. So then you understand like, okay, I need this to feel balanced in my body. I need this space to feel clear in my mind so that when I go into the rest of my day, I know what I want to do. I know where I want to be. And so that space really becomes an opportunity to cultivate awareness. You know, the big buzzword in modern days is mindfulness. But we do use the practice to cultivate mindfulness of what is serving and supporting me. And then what's on the periphery of that, that's sort of this energy sucker, this black hole of things I don't need to let every thought in my head consume all of my energy or effort. Some thoughts are just going to be there. And I really like to highlight for people, is like, meditation doesn't mean stopping thinking. Like, just let that go, because your brain, much like I said, like if you're not breathing, you're not alive. If your brain isn't creating thoughts, you're brain dead. So there's going to be thoughts. How much you let those thoughts consume you, how much effort you put into each thought, that we get to start to practice, and we get to start control in what you do when you're practicing with me. And then you've got a little bit more ability to let the things on the periphery go.
It's so true. So earlier I mentioned at times we can feel like we're on an island, you know, kind of by ourselves with the things that we take on for our clients, and of course nobody understands. So this is one of the many reasons I think it is important for real estate professionals to be plugged into like our local association. But there's also setbacks and losses in this industry. So do you have any tips to help us build resilience and coping skills to manage difficult situations and setbacks?
Absolutely. I love to, Shauna will tell you for sure, especially like the class you took yesterday. I will talk about resilience, that I am very, very intentionally creating a sense of creating stress, right? It's physical stress from work, but I want you to understand that like, I can stress the system, and then I can calm and replenish, and that's resilience, right? Kind of going to a limit and then coming back and then being able to do it again. And when I present physical stress within a practice, I also really try to bring this mental component to it of, look at you being resilient. Look at you challenging yourself or being challenged by me, calming yourself down, replenishing yourself, and then having the willingness to go again, to sit with the discomfort. For some people, that discomfort is physical movement. For some people, that discomfort is being still. And is not looking at my phone, and is not looking at my watch, and is not doing the 10 other things that are pinging around in my brain. And so that awareness of where you're already being resilient, and then purposely putting in these little places where you have to have resilience, and that starts to transfer outside of the practice.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So just having the mindfulness, the awareness of like, okay, when did I get challenged? Yeah, I felt defeated. Yeah, I went, took a walk, I took a breath, I went and screamed into a pillow, and that's okay. I went and tore up a whole bunch of paper because I was really angry.
And that's okay.
And then I tried again, and I did it again. I've got a 5-year-old, right? I will tell him, if he falls down, every time he gets back up, that's where I really try to, applaud him. Because I'm like, yeah, you came back and tried again. You just go, I couldn't ride my bike. It's like, I give up.
Done.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So giving yourself credit for your resiliency will build your resiliency.
That's interesting. I like that.
Yeah. Our bodies, I talked about our bodies and our minds being sort of same thing. Your nervous system, which is part of your stress response system, it doesn't differentiate a lot between physical stress and mental stress, right? Think about when you're stressed, your heart rate quickens, right? Your blood pumps more, your muscles twitch. So to build resiliency, and you can sort of practice, this is it is not fun. But it is a no-cost way to sort of do some resiliency training that can transfer into mental resiliency. So at the end of your shower, or if you have a barrel in your backyard and you can fill it up with rainwater, but turn your shower all the way down to cold and just sit there, minute if you can, but like 30 seconds, and it might be 10 seconds, but be in that discomfort place. And if you can get to a shiver, that's a great thing, but that discomfort, and then turn off the water and just feel yourself respond and bounce back from it. And that it's a very like actionable way to work resiliency in the neurowiring of your brain and in your nervous system. And it translates to some mental tenacity.
That's interesting. So if you did that at the beginning of your day,
I do it.
You kind of, okay, well, I did that already. It was hard. It was uncomfortable. So now going through the rest of my day, should be a breeze.
Yeah. And it is like the mental, like not wanting to do it and be like, oh, it's going to be really freaking cold and I don't want to do it. That's part of it. And choosing to do it anyway. Right? Choosing to do something that's uncomfortable. And you're like, oh, but I still did it.
Are you challenging us to do
fun.
this cold blast every morning?
I try and do it I probably do it 4 times a week.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't like to be cold.
Yeah. And so then there are good studies. Like, now the studies are done like dunking just because it's a controlled environment. Like they can't do the laboratory studies, scientific studies with like just a cold shower just because it's too hard to control parameters. But there's good scientific research that shows like this cold dunking is really
So ice
beneficial.
baths, athletes, they sit in ice baths. So I wonder if part of it is for their muscles and part of it maybe, just seeing a big tub of ice and getting in it. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, Katie, so burnout. Over the last couple of years, it's been, it's been very challenging in our industry, and burnout is real. So, what are some techniques that you use to help recharge and regain focus?
Yeah, I love
besides a cold shower.
Yeah, I like having a variety of tools, and think about like tools in different sizes, right? So, like, what's a small tool you can do, like in just a moment? There's a great, for your nervous system, big, long exhales. So it's called physiological sigh. Wait, think about when you've had a really stressful drive home and you put the car in park and you turn off the key. What's the first thing you do? And your physiology does it for you naturally.
That's true.
So if you force it, one way to sort of down-regulate out of a stress state is these big, long sighs. So you do a big inhale, little inhale, long exhale. And do that 3 or 4 times. So like if you're talking like bite size, like sort of like a coping thing right there, that's a little bite size thing you can do. And then like take that up to your next size. So you're like, all right, I need something that's like 5-10 minutes. So is that leaving your phone on the desk, going for a 5-minute walk around the block, getting some fresh air? And again, like science has shown, like fresh air, light in your eyes, change of scenery does so much for replenishment. The email's going to be there when you get back, and that's okay. But it's okay to disengage from it for a little while. That's not giving up. That's, right, coming back to it and being like, I'm going to take a little break, and then I'm going to refresh.
Yeah, you're not leaving it for 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm coming back, because we can't. It's just like, we can't always just go on a 2-week vacation to replenish.
Right.
It's just not realistic.
Right.
So you got a little sigh, then you got like a 5 or a 10-minute walk. Then what's a bigger thing? Are you a glass of wine and a bubble bath person? Are you axe throwing person? Are you taking, sitting on the couch? I feel so replenished. My dog, I have a pit bull, and he is just like, I know, like big scary pit bull, and like he would like nothing more than for you to schnuzzle him on the couch. Aww. And I will sometimes like set like 20-minute or like one TV show, and I will watch like one 30-minute TV show, like Marvelous Mrs. Maisel or like Ted Lasso, which are like both shows that like make me laugh and like you end up feeling good, but also like just having him on my lap. So, try and find something that's like a 30-minute replenishment for yourself, and so that you've got all these different things that you can use in different instances, and they're all in your little toolbox of self-care, if you want to describe it that way.
Yeah, makes total sense.
Yeah.
So, Katie, how does yoga and mindfulness translate to life outside of a session? So I know you're teaching these things during sessions, so how do they take it with them when they go?
Absolutely, yeah. And this is a big thing for me. I always tell people, like, especially in Western culture, you know, we look at yoga as like, oh, this thing you go to a studio to do, and I have a mat and I have my special clothes for it, and it's about the postures I do on the mat. And I really empower people to figure out, how does yoga translate out of the studio, off of the mat, out of a session that we're doing together. In terms of last week, a couple weeks ago when it was Valentine's Day, I taught all about kindness and compassion, right? And that we move our bodies with kindness and compassion. Sometimes it means we stop and rest. Sometimes that means we don't underestimate our own strength and we keep going. And then as I'm teaching that, it's like, how do you take that out of the room? How can I be more kind and compassionate to the people who are driving next to me on the road, to the person who is in front of me at the grocery store who cannot find their credit card to save their life? How can I be more compassionate to my client who really can't decide between 3 houses they've looked at, or, you know, if they want to commit to making an offer on this house, and we got to, because they're only going to take offers on this house for, 48 more hours. How can I be kind and compassionate to them and not, you know, letting them off the hook? Like, there's a 48-hour deadline for this. Like, you're going to have to make a decision. But being kind and compassionate in those things. And so I always, in a session with me, I always try to highlight that of, this is how you did it here. How's it going to carry over? How's it going to bleed out into the rest of your life? Like, you felt it internally, both in the way you moved your body and also in the way you directed thoughts to yourself. Direct that outward in the way that you engage once you leave this space.
And I definitely, this is one of the things I learned from you that I think my family, you know, identified. It's, you know, instead of getting annoyed with the other agent who won't call you back or this or that, try to be compassionate and then think, okay, I don't know what they have going on, but maybe it's something, you know, difficult. And so just understanding that you don't know, but when you have that mindset of care and compassion, it does something to your own mind. Yeah. And it's really great that it can really transform you into something totally different, and you just become more at peace with things if you just, it's almost like you have to train your brain.
Yeah. And it's kind of compassion, but it's also, you know, resiliency and strength. And
yes.
Right, I will bring different focuses to different classes. That was just one that we had used for an example. Being intentional,
you know, you say that a lot, and you have to be intentional with these things and think about them, right? And focus. So I think that's great.
Yeah, and the practice just gives you that very focused time and space to do that and to do that work. Yeah. And then it's clear, and then when all the other stuff starts to come in, you're like, oh no, but it's still clear at the center. I still know.
So first, thank you. Thank you for speaking with us. This is such an important topic, and you've already made, I mean, you know, you've made an impact on my life, and I believe that you've made an impact on our listeners' life. So I appreciate that so much. And, you know, is there anything else? I mean, you've got so many great tips that I take every day, but is there anything else that you could share with our listeners that you think would be helpful?
I would just say, just look at your life and look at where all the ways that you're nourishing yourself are, right? Like, our societal focus a lot on like what you should be eating, what you should be drinking, but like, how are you moving yourself to be nourished? How are you taking care of the space between your ears, at your head, at your heart, and being nourished in that way? And that's through social connection, that's through moving your body, that's through, you know, breathing and all these different things. So nourish yourself in all the ways so that you feel stronger, so you feel more resilient, and that you are inspired. And when that light is really vibrant and really shiny, other people see that. They do. It illuminates outward and it radiates outward.
So true.
That is true. Well, thanks again.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure to meet you.
For those listening, thanks for hanging out with us. And don't forget to subscribe to Welcome to the Top wherever you get your podcasts. Also, leave us a review. We want to know how we're doing. If you have a question or topic you'd like us to discuss, email us at ask@welcometothetop.com, then listen to hear us cover it.
We can't wait to hear from you, and thank you guys for listening. I'm Shauna Quisto, and keep building for your future.
Special thanks to our hosts, Jonna Fernandez and Shauna Quisto. Producer, Bree Westbury. Audio engineer, Mike Maples. Outreach and Guest Relations Manager, Kendall Crawford. and podcast administrator Sean Offsall. Tune in next time, and don't forget to enjoy your journey to the top. The statements made by speakers in this podcast do not necessarily represent the views or position of the Collin County Association of Realtors, its leadership, or its members. This podcast is not intended to give legal, financial, medical, or other advice, but simply to provide information as a springboard to further discussion and investigation.